Konnichiwa! So SNK are on the verge of releasing the Neo Geo Arcade Stick Pro. In today's show, we're going to be looking back at SNK's track record for releasing emulation hardware and asking, is it going to be worth your money and will they get it right this time? Game on! Hey, welcome back to the Retro Gamer Boy channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my most favourite console developers ever, and that's SNK and the Neo Geo. Now when I was growing up, the Neo Geo AES was the console everyone wanted, but that no one could afford. In fact, I think I only had one friend that had it, and he could only afford one game, and that was Metal Slug. But that game was stunning. While the rest of us were slumming it out with our 8-bit consoles, he had arcade quality gaming in his house. Many years later though, I managed to pick myself up an AES in a couple of games, and it was such a brilliant console. But unfortunately I ended up selling it, I think maybe to buy a PS2 or something stupid like that. And it's one of those sales that we all have that I just absolutely regretted, along with selling pretty much most of my Super Nintendo collection. Now since I sold it, I've always thought about picking up another one. But in 2012, my prayers were seemingly answered with the Neo Geo X Gold. The Neo Geo X was the first of SNK's emulation hardware devices that brought back their original gaming titles. Now I think it's really important that we take a look back at the Neo Geo X and the Neo Geo Mini to really understand if the Arcade Stick Pro is potentially going to be any good. First up, we have the Neo Geo X, and this console came out to a ton of criticism. Some of it fair and some of it not so much. Now aesthetically, I think what the developers did for the Neo Geo X was pretty fantastic. Yes, some of the build quality isn't super perfect. The plastic is a little lighter than the original. That could be down to the fact that plastic manufacturing and regulations have changed over the time, or they skimped on development costs, but it's not terrible. It feels pretty good. And they were authentic, which I think is important. The packaging that we've got here, when you open up the box and go inside, very similar to the AES. We've got the micro switches here and the arcade stick. The mold apparently is based on the original, and when we look at the base unit itself, it is like a mini Neo Geo. It's brilliant. Now when we open up the Neo Geo X base unit here, we find the brains of the operation, which is the Neo Geo X itself, which is a handheld console. Now the build quality on this is pretty good. It feels pretty solid. The back here is like a rubbery back here, so I've got a nice grip. The buttons feel good to press down, and the micro switches on this thumbstick are fantastic. You don't notice it as much in handheld mode, but stick it into the dock and play it through HDMI and it's a completely different story. The scaling on here, the smoothing algorithm, the audio is dreadful. Everything they pump through this HDMI is awful. Now after the relatively poor success of the Neo Geo X, SNK strived to make it better by releasing the Neo Geo Mini. The Neo Geo Mini would see a doubling of the games library, 40 games on the system, an improved screen. The Neo Geo Mini screen is a thing of beauty. Menus and navigation were improved, there was a marked improvement on audio, and we got some really cool features in there, like plugging in some new Neo Geo CD controllers that you could buy separately for the console. So, had SNK cracked it? Well, not quite. Now to start with, they went with a really bizarre choice of form factor for me. They went for this kind of shrunk down barcade. Now the quality of the plastics on it's really nice and the screen is fantastic on it. But when we get to the buttons, this is where the first complaints come in. Now unlike the X and the original consoles, this Barcade Mini has no micro switches on its stick, and so it feels really light and floaty. The same goes to the buttons. They don't really have that nice feeling of a Neo Geo console when you press them. Now, something that should have been a really cool addition to the Mini were the Neo Geo CD controllers. But again, we were let down. Like the joystick, the thumbstick on the Neo Geo CD controllers had no micro switches, unlike this original controller here. And again, we have a problem with the emulation. Now, when you're playing it on the device on the small screen, like the X, the screen looks pretty good. The audio is way better. But as soon as we stick it through an HDMI, it's still not perfect. The upscaling on it is pretty dreadful. You can put smoothing on, which weirdly enough makes the picture look better, but it's not perfect. All this brings us to the Neo Geo Arcade Stick Pro. Now, the Arcade Stick Pro is a mixture between a standalone emulation console and a peripheral. It comes with 20 games on it. It comes fully equipped with two modes, joystick mode and console mode. Now, joystick mode allows you to plug the Arcade Stick Pro into the Neo Geo Mini, which in turn allows you to play all those games on the Mini with your arcade stick. Now, for me, this is really weird. The arcade stick isn't small. It's about 45 centimeters wide and about 12 centimeters high. And if you're just going to use the mini console itself, you're going to have this huge controller and you're going to be hunched over this small screen as you play it. Now, of course, you can plug your Mini straight into your TV as well. Now, the big question for me is that the fact that this works with the Mini probably indicates it's the same company producing the Arcade Stick Pro. And given the poor job they did with the Neo Geo CD controller and the arcade stick on the Mini, I just hope that they've learnt their lesson and put micro switches into the joystick of the Arcade Stick Pro. Now, another function of the joystick mode is that you can plug the Arcade Stick Pro into a PC, which probably means that you can play your PC games with the Arcade Stick Pro, which is a pretty cool feature. Now, the second mode is console mode. Now, the Neo Geo Arcade Stick comes with 20 fighting games already installed. Again, we have to go back to the Neo Geo X and the Neo Geo Mini to look at the emulation, and only hope that SNK and their partners have learnt how to crack emulation. It's definitely not all doom and gloom for the Neo Geo Arcade Stick Pro. There's a ton of stuff we don't know about it. We don't know the games, we don't know how much it's cost, and we haven't had a hands-on with the device itself. And so there's still a pretty good chance that we're going to get a decent entry from SNK. For me though, I really wish they'd pursued the Neo Geo X form factor. I think they were onto something there. It felt so authentic that I think just a little bit more work and it would have been a perfect console. If you want the perfect emulated Neo Geo experience, then you can go out and buy a docking station for the Neo Geo X, the arcade stick for the Neo Geo X, and a retro Pi. Stick them all together and you will have the perfect emulated Neo Geo experience. A near perfect form factor with near perfect emulation. So, should you consider buying a Neo Geo Arcade Stick Pro? Well, we still don't know how much it's going to cost or what the games are going to be like. My advice, considering the last two consoles and emulation devices that we got from SNK, I would wait for those reviews to come in and then make your decision, because there's no guarantee that they're going to get it right this time. Fans of the Neo Geo, leave a comment below, let me know and everyone else know what you think of the Arcade Stick Pro, and if you would recommend the Neo Geo X or Mini, or just go the route of pure emulation. I really love talking about the Neo Geo. It is one of my all-time favourite consoles. I've definitely got to pick myself up an AES again. If you're a fan of Neo Geo or retro gaming in general, then make sure you subscribe by clicking on my little pixel head below. And if you like this video, you may like some of my other videos that I've put down the side here.